We're back less a day away from more Overwatch League matches, and first up this weekend we have the Chengdu Hunters versus the Guangzhou Charge as we get into our predictions. So both these teams actually had some really crazy matches this past weekend, both of them going to Game 5. The Charge went there twice, but the Chengdu Hunters was actually able to take it to Game 5 against the Shanghai Dragons, which, might look good to some people, and I think it does to me too, but I am going to have to go with the Charge here. I do think the Charge are looking pretty decent compared to some of the rest of the teams in their division, but the Chengdu Hunters, as always, kind of just that crazy team, you never know what's going to happen. I do think the Charge will end up taking out in the end, even though if you watch my other video, I'm still not completely sold on the Charge, because they're a bit inconsistent. They only have a +1 map differential, so I honestly do think this will be a really good, interesting series to start up the week. Not only close, but entertaining with team comps and player interactions, all that stuff. I think it'll be a really good series. And then next up, we have the Seoul Dynasty versus Shanghai Dragons, and this is another matchup that, I'm actually really excited to watch because of the players involved and everything. The Seoul Dynasty, they are so close to winning a lot of games, aren't they? But they just never seem to be able to pull it out. And I think, the pieces are there, they're just something missing, they're not clicking. I think after all this, we can look back at the London Spitfire's decision to kind of reset the roster as an alright one, because we know that Badosin, Gesture, Prophet, these are all really good players that went to the Dynasty, but they're just not, clicking like they were that year they won the championship. And, maybe the Seoul Dynasty need to do some retooling in the offseason, but right now I think they have the tools to keep them competitive this season, but I don't think it's going to happen against the Shanghai Dragons. The Dragons, too good of a team, obviously, one of the best records in the entire Overwatch League, definitely in the Pacific area, and so I think the Shanghai Dragons will come away with that one. Next up, the Spark versus the Spitfire. Now these are my two favorite teams in the conference. I love those two teams. The Spark, I think, are going to be able to take this one. They looked really good this past week, I think, especially with Mika and QOQ coming in for their debuts. I thought they did really, really well, and they really impressed me. And Architect, obviously, he's really new too. And that's 3 new players that were added this team to an already solid roster, and I think the Spark are about to take it to the next level, and this will be their first test against London Spitfire, a team that is honestly performing really well for their first year altogether like this, which I'm really happy to see. I thought I was so torn at the beginning of the season because I wanted to believe in these guys and I wanted to believe in the staff. But I didn't hear anything great about these players, but they really came in, they proved everybody wrong. They proved they can compete at an Overwatch League level, and that's really exciting to see. So, but this one though, I do think the Spark are going to take it. I'll definitely be watching though, as they're my 2 favorite teams in this region. Next up, the Florida Mayhem versus Houston Outlaws, and now we're getting into another really interesting matchup actually, because Houston Outlaws, we're watching on the screen right now, Linkster and Dante absolutely went crazy, and especially Dante, and the rest of the team wasn't too bad either against the Gladiators. Everybody kind of uses that gateway team, but the Mayhem actually fell despite being second in the main melee. They looked a bit weak and they weren't able to perform up to par, but I do think their DPS, Yaki and BQB, will bounce back, and they're a solid DPS duo if you're going to try to stop Dante and Linkster after a hot week. I think Yaki will pick it up from last week. I know there was a lot of doubt about his ability, but I thought his performance was pretty underrated. I think they'll come in and they'll give Houston Outlaws a run for money, taking the series. Next up, Dallas Fuel is Toronto Defiant. This one's not quite as good of a series if you want, the straight up best players in the league to be playing. But I do think it's a really interesting narrative. The Toronto Defiant are always kind of just on that brink of being really bad, even though it looks like they have a lot of good players. And the Dallas Fuel, of course, with the K on the bench, everyone's kind of worried that Onigod will not be able to fill in for his place, and that even with just that one player switch made them look really awful. And I gotta agree, they didn't look great, but I do believe in this team. I think that the staff here will do a good job of getting these guys back on task, and I think the Dallas Fuel could come away with it. I'm gonna go with my gut. I'm gonna go with the Fuel here. I think they'll be able to come back, especially if Decay comes back. I don't know if he'll be back this week or not. If he does, they'll definitely win. If not, I still think that the Fuel will be able to squeak it out here. Next up, the Titans versus Uprising. Now this one, maybe some of the worst teams in the league, but I think one of the most entertaining matches of the week, as both of them are, trying to come up on the rise. It seems like Boston finally have something to believe in, and the Vancouver Titans, of course, coming off a big win against the Fuel. Even if the Fuel weren't the best last week, it's huge for this young roster to be able to make that first impression after a few weeks and finally start winning on their own, getting some impressive plays out there. And they're starting to show individually how talented they are, and that's really awesome. I think the Titans will be able to pull us out, and I'm actually really interested in this one a lot more than some of the other matches, because I don't know, there's something to me, I love watching the underdog teams, even when they're just facing each other, try to outperform expectations and show hey, they're here for a reason. They're in the Overwatch League. Just because they're not the Vancouver Titans of last year doesn't mean they can't prove that they know how to play this game. Next up, the Justice versus the Gladiators. I think the Gladiators should be able to come away with this one despite losing to the Outlaws last week. I think this team is overall too talented individually compared to the Justice to fall short. And team-wise, I think they have a lot more going for them as far as coaching and like training together, simply because the Washington Justice have had to reset their roster recently. I still think it's going to take some time for the Justice to get back from that. It is a step-by-step process. Even in traditional sports, like these rebuilding phases sometimes last a few years. It's not going to be an instant turnaround from when the Justice replaced two of their best players into becoming a championship team. So Gladiators should be able to take this one. Next up, we have the Shanghai Dragons versus the Hangzhou Spark. Another really good matchup. The Shanghai Dragons, I'm going to pick. I think they should come away with this. But in my heart, this is where the Spark can really, really prove that I'm not just going too far in saying that they're now one of the best teams in the Pacific. I love this roster, but I do think the Dragons will be able to come out with the win here. Chengdu Hunters versus Seoul Dynasty. Now this one I am really torn about. I think I'm going to go with the Hunters here. I just haven't been convinced enough with the inconsistencies of the Dynasty. I think it could go either way, but overall I think the Hunters will be able to pull it out. And honestly, it'll come down to the DPS though of the Seoul Dynasty. If they're able to turn up and play how we know they can play, that would be the difference maker, but I'm going to go with the Hunters here. Next up we have the NYXL and the Guangzhou Charge, and I'm going with NYXL here, even though they were actually upset by the Spark, even though the Spark lost to the Charge. I think that the only reason the XL lost was simply because the Hangzhou Sparks, they had some really big playmakers in Mika and QOQ show up, but overall I thought the DPS line on the Spark just outplayed the Excelsior, and I don't see that happening quite as much with the Charge. I do think Charge have a strong DPS duo, but I think the Excel have a lot of versatility and overall a better fit for this meta, that they'll be able to take over and take down the Charge, even though it'll probably be a close series, and it'll really be a really important one for determining the top of the standings over there. Next up, the Los Angeles Valiant and Paris Eternal. Now, Paris Eternal are one of my favorite Atlantic teams, and I'm going to be excited to see how they start performing, because they've been a bit weak this past few weeks now with Sparkle in lineup. Even though everyone expected him to be a superstar right away, it hasn't quite been that, which is kind of fair, to be honest, that we probably shouldn't have had such high expectations for him. He is so young and, just first few weeks in the Overwatch League, that I think he will get there one day. But I believe it was on Plat Chat they were discussing a lot that this team just doesn't have the fit around Sparkle, that if you're going to hard focus your team comps around and your team strategy around Sparkle, it's just not going to work out. And I think the Paris Eternal are going to take some time to fix it out. But I do think that they need to get Soon in there more. I really think he's a star. I don't think that people give him enough credit because they have XE on the team, and XE is really good too. But I do think that so far the Paris Eternal have looked way better with Soon and Sparkle in the lineup. Against the Valiant though, I think the Valiant are going to be able to take it. The Valiant looking really good last week. Shaq's absolutely roasting, and I think that will be the big difference maker here if the DPS line on Paris Eternal is still struggling to figure it out. Overall, I think that we need to give some more credit to the Valiant. I know there's a little bit of talk about them, but they're really performing well. This is another one of those teams where like the Spitfire, I really wanted to believe in them at the beginning of the season, even though all I'd heard was bad stuff, and I was like, I don't know these players. I can't make my own opinion simply because I have a gut feeling, And that's exactly what happened with the Valiant though and the Spitfire. These guys, they come in and they're completely underrated, and they come in and really show up, and I think it took the Valiant a little while to really show that, but their tank line, McGravy, Dreamer, they're all really starting to show up and prove that they're a contender. And it's really interesting because at this point in the league, there's like the Shock and the Dragons at the top, and then there are like a few teams middling next to them. Like the Charge have a really good record, even though I'm still not super convinced about them. The Excel have a good record, but there's so many teams right on the brink of contention. It makes for a lot of extremely entertaining Overwatch, and I think that's basically what the Valiant are right now, where every week you have to like really focus and get like so hyped to watch them, because you don't know if they're gonna be that super dominant team. It's not like the 16-0 Patriots playing in an 0-16 Browns team is like actually really interesting, and you never know how they're going to perform, but you're still excited, you want to tune in, and I think that's what's going to happen to the Valiant this week. I think it'll be a really close series, and I think it'll be a big stepping stone for Paris if they can pull out this win, but I do think the Valiant will take it. Next up, the Reign versus Titans. I'm going to go with the Reign here. I think that overall their individual quality is, if not necessarily superior, they've just had a lot more time to play with each other and develop as a team, and the Titans are obviously, they've not really done much. They beat the Fuel, let's be honest. I think the Reign are better than that. They just took down the Toronto Defiant 3-0, and even though they've been struggling, they have not been the team we had them up to be. I do think they are better than the Titans. And the next up we have the Fusion and the Shock, and this one will be a good series, but I think the Shock should be able to take this one. They're definitely far and away the best team in the league right now, and one of the most depth. I believe it was Reinforced. He was discussing how this team relies so much on individual talent rather than team coordination, that when you go against a team like the Shock who has that team coordination and the individual talent, it's going to be rough. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Shock here. We'll see a lot of big plays come out from the Fusion, but overall, in the end, I don't think those individual pop-up moments can be counted on enough to give you the win against a team like the Shock. But either way, that's a really good game to finish off the week, because there will be a lot of individual quality plays, I believe. Yeah, and the Shock, I think, no matter what roster they field, could probably beat the Fusion. And it's kind of crazy that there's such a gap in our belief about how good the Shock team is, because I'm sure one day they're gonna burst their bubble and lose to a team like the Fusion. But I don't think that'll be enough to break my view on how well they are going to do this season, even if they do end up dropping this game. But I am fairly confident. I imagine a 3-1 would be about right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. There are a ton of good games this week. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.